She helped the cause of women by giving them a feeling there was nothing they could not do. She was in rebellion against a world which had been made, for women, too safe, too unexciting. Married to the Media, the triumph and tragedy of Amelia Earhart.
What makes Amelia Earhart famous today is the combination of the triumph of her career, what she did with it, the publicity that she had, the magazine articles that she wrote, the books that she wrote, but also the tragedy around her death and how she died and nobody ever finding her.
There's no question that she was one of the best-known female pilots ever, and she achieved great things, not only as a pilot, but in other ways as well.
She was trying to promote the idea that half of the people on this earth were not being utilized to their fullest extent.
Amelia Earhart was born on July 24, 1897, in Atchison, Kansas, to a family of privilege and wealth. She and her sister Muriel were unusual in that they were allowed to engage in activities often considered unsuitable for girls raised during the Victorian era. The girls were encouraged by their family to achieve as individuals, yet their father's drinking often cost him his jobs and the family was forced to move frequently. Amelia remembered attending 6 different high schools before graduating. Yet Amelia's childhood instilled a curiosity about life, an ability to adapt, and a desire to stretch and explore. About her younger life, Amelia drew this lesson. In fact, I think it is just about the most important thing any girl can do. Try herself out. Do something. Helping people came naturally to Amelia. In 1917, during World War I, she worked as a nurse's aide in Toronto, caring for wounded soldiers and airmen. Later, she became a social worker in Boston, helping immigrant families adjust to life in America.
Many people today view Amelia as the first female pilot, but in reality she wasn't. The first female pilot was in the early 1900s, and Amelia didn't come along until the late 20s.
When she took a ride in an airplane, however, she was hooked. On January 3, 1921, Amelia took her first flying lesson in Long Beach, California, from a woman flight instructor. She earned her pilot's license in December 1921. She left Los Angeles for Boston in May 1924 and joined the Boston chapter of the National Aeronautic Association, where she continued her flying career while earning a living as a social worker. Then, in April of 1928, Amelia Earhart's life changed forever when she agreed to be the first woman to fly across the Atlantic. Even though she would just be a passenger, Amelia became the most famous woman aviator in the world, thanks to the publicity efforts of George P. Putnam. The team left Newfoundland in a Fokker F-7 named Friendship 1 year to the day after Lindbergh's famous flight and arrived in Wales 21 hours later to a waiting press.
Here you see Lady Lindy, whose triumphant flight across the Atlantic is the admiration of the whole world. What a wonderful woman. And isn't she like Lindbergh?
Her life also began to include George Putnam. The two developed a close friendship during preparation for the Atlantic crossing. They were married in Connecticut on February 7, 1931.
The relationship between Amelia and the Media, of course, was welded by her husband, George Palmer Putnam, being part of the Media.
She married a publicist, and he really put her out in the media.
After their marriage, Amelia decided to become the first woman to solo the Atlantic. 5 years had passed since Lindbergh made his famous crossing in 1927, yet no one had been successful since then.
Please don't forget the phone just the minute you get there, eh?
I will.
Goodbye.
Amelia's solo flight was plagued with problems. Her wings iced, her altimeter failed. Yet in spite of it all, she landed triumphantly on a farm in Northern Ireland 14 hours later.
Here she is, safe and sound on a farm in Ireland, having just completed the first flight by a woman across the Atlantic.
She got tremendous acclaim, publicity because of that, and just became internationally famous, world famous.
You took a notion to fly across the ocean, our American girl, finding your way.
After her famous solo flight in a ticker-tape parade, Amelia was invited to speak at many functions where she expressed her belief in equality for women.
May I say one thing? It does not take courage so much to go as it does interest in the task. I believe that women have as much courage as men.
The media, for some reason, was very attracted to her as a public figure. They couldn't get enough of Amelia.
Yesterday I hopped off from Los Angeles about noontime and landed in Newark this morning after a non-stop transcontinental trip.
And what did you carry on the trip?
You mean to eat?
Yeah, to eat and drink.
Well, I carried some water, of course, because my cockpit is very warm. And I carried a sandwich in case. I didn't eat it, though. I carried some hot chocolate and the old reliable tomato juice.
What kind of a sandwich was it?
Chicken sandwich.
Amelia Earhart's relationship to the media was one of tolerance. She didn't really appreciate them wanting to know everything about her life, past and present. But she also saw them as a necessary evil. To do the triumphs that she wanted to do, to fly across the Atlantic or to fly around the world, you needed backers. And the media was one of the best ways to do that. It would rile up publicity. People would get interested in the flight that you're about to attempt or that you have attempted. They would buy your books. They'd go to see your lectures.
But by 1936, Amelia's name was starting to fade from the headlines, so to keep her name in the news, they began to make plans for an even longer flight.
Contemplated course covers about 27,000 miles. It will be the first flight, if successful, which approximates the equator. Indeed, I crossed the equator 4 times.
But a flight of 27,000 miles required a lot more airplane and a lot more money, which meant they needed backers. The plane, a Lockheed Electra, was financed by Purdue University. George scheduled an extensive lecture circuit for Amelia to raise more funds.
You expect to accomplish something for aviation, do you not?
Well, yes, I do. And if the flight's successful, I hope it will increase women's interest in flying. If so, it will be worthwhile as far as I'm concerned.
Well, how about taking me along?
Well, of course, I think a great deal of you, but 180 pounds of gasoline on a flight perhaps might be a little more valuable.
You mean you prefer 180 pounds of gasoline to 180 pounds of husband?
I think you've guessed right.
President Roosevelt endorsed the idea of her around-the-world flight and helped tremendously when they needed to get passports and permission to land in all these foreign countries and place oil and gasoline there in advance of their flight. The State Department wrote those letters or sent the telegrams.
On June 1st, 1937, Amelia Earhart and navigator Fred Noonan started their around-the-world flight in Miami, Florida. That gave her just over a month to make the difficult trip because George had scheduled a welcoming ceremony in Los Angeles for the 4th of July holiday. Everything went as planned, and the public followed her every move. But halfway across the Pacific near Howland Island, their plane disappeared on July 2nd, 1937. Her disappearance sparked the largest naval rescue operation in U.S. history. President Roosevelt authorized millions of dollars for the search, but her plane was never found. The publicity value of her triumphant circumnavigation of the Earth will never be known, but Amelia's tragic end was a different matter. Her mysterious disappearance brought the aviator far more publicity than any event her husband George Putnam could have dreamed of. Newspapers, never quite sure when to print an obituary, began to run editorials praising the lost flyer's triumphs.
The real thing that made Amelia the most famous woman aviator of all time was the fact that she disappeared in such a tragic way and so mysteriously.
There were a lot of different factors that contributed to her end, but at the end of the day, I don't think we'll ever know what really happened unless we found the plane. It's just one of those mysteries that just fascinates people. She fascinated people while she was alive, and she fascinated people with her death.
Isn't it amazing? The slightest hint of something new about her disappearance still makes front-page news 70 years later. There is a marriage that's just celebrated its 70th anniversary.
Amelia Earhart spoke out for the importance of equal rights for women. She proved to a generation of women that they could rise beyond the expectations of their mothers, and she freed the next generation to spread their wings and soar.